So, Dave, welcome to Create Brave. I'm delighted that you've joined us, partly because I tricked you into it. We met at the Function Body and Mind event, and you were speaking, and I sat and listened to you speak for an hour. And at the end of your talk, you said, "Does anyone have any questions?" And I put my hand up and said, "Will you come on my podcast?"
You did.
I did. And I trapped you.
You did.
So, thank you for being here, even though you couldn't say no.
That's very true, yeah.
But the reason that I was really, really captured by your talk, and really wanted to extend the conversation through this podcast was, I was fascinated by your experience through the corporate world, through the transformations that you've been through and the lessons that you learned through those experiences, to become a coach and an ultra endurance athlete, which, as you know, is something that I am absolutely fascinated by, the link between mindset and ultra endurance athletes. So, Dave, could you just, before we launch into this pages of questions that I have for you, could you just give us a little bit of an introduction into who you are and a summary of your background?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Claire, for inviting me on. You didn't trick me, by the way. I was delighted because I looked around and I thought, no one's going to ask me any questions here. So for you to invite me on was an absolute pleasure, and I'm delighted to be here. And I could tell there was common ground, I think, when we first met at that event. So where do I start? I guess I'm a former executive now turned performance coach. So I generally help ambitious people, predominantly guys who've got, I guess, an element of performance that they want to unlock in their own lives, whether it's career, whether it's lifestyle. A lot of it comes down to mindset, and it is kind of baked in my own lived experience. That executive leadership role that I had in the corporate world was off the back of almost like a 20-year career, I guess. Started off in financial services, learning my craft, if you like, as a marketeer, with a brand called First Direct, part of HSBC Group. And I always had a passion for sport, and I still do have a passion for sport. And I kind of chased my dreams down, back in the day. And I was lucky enough to work for Manchester United for nearly 6 years, in their marketing function, their commercial team. I guess part of the period of that commercial frenzy, so to speak, when the club were acquiring commercial partners all around the world. So I was part of that successful commercial function there, and then I went into another sports organisation, what was Team Sky, when I first joined. I think it was 2016 when I first joined, and I saw some unbelievable success at Team Sky, both on the road and off the road. I was there when we won the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th Tour de France, I think. Part of the, I was quite exposed at the time because I went from kind of small fish in a big pond to being the custodian of one of the biggest, I guess, sports brands in the UK at the time. And yeah, it kind of led me down the path of getting into an executive role outside of sport. I kind of left sport. I can't remember what year it was now. He's back coming out of COVID. I left sport and went into a private equity-owned travel business, I spent 3 years at Travel Council as a local business to the northwest. I was on the exec board there as the customer director, leading their marketing functions. And then, that kind of brought me into this world of coaching in many ways. I've been on my lived experience through the corporate world, and equally outside of that, I started to really question myself quite a lot. If you're exposed to coaching, that deep kind of inner work can lead you down some paths that can be quite profound in terms of who you are, your identity, what you want to achieve. And that really empowered me as an individual. And actually that's kind of what gave me that platform to believe in myself and I guess scratch an itch that I'd had for years and years and years, which was, I want to do something myself. I want to build something myself. And that led me down the path of launching onto my coaching business, which launched in November last year. And that's me predominantly coaching one-to-one, but equally helping corporate clients as well with cultural transformation or building teams and elevating performance.
Was there like a turning point from you've obviously been someone who's always kind of pushed yourself the type of
Yeah.
roles that you've had and the rooms that you've been in. But was there do you see a point of transformation? Does transformation sound like too big a word, or was it more organic for you, the kind of change of attitude and approach?
I love that question, Claire. I love the framing of it because I think people attach transformation to like a big, scary kind of paradigm shift, don't they? It's and it can be quite overwhelming. But actually, for me, transformation is just about a mindset of human beings are not fixed; they're dynamic individuals, right? If you think you're a fixed object, then you're not going to change or transform. And for me, I always try to adopt that mentality that I'm not a fixed individual and therefore change is inevitable, growth is inevitable. So I kind of adopted that approach throughout all of my career. And when I got those signs and signals that things weren't quite right for me as an individual, or I needed to shake things up, or I was just feeling a bit predictable or a bit comfortable or just dissatisfied, that was I guess a signal for me to take some action and do something about it. Doesn't mean to say it was always easy. It wasn't always easy, and it never is, and it still isn't for me now, right? It's just, I guess it's just part of my identity now. I wouldn't call it huge transformations. It's just I guess an incremental development and incremental changes over a period of time, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you know your identity is shifting, and you've become a different version of who you were 12 months ago, 2 years ago, and people say, you've changed or you're different. It's like, well, yeah, because I'm a human. I'm not fixed.
I really, really relate to that idea of change over a period of time that actually becomes quite significant, almost like a complete shift in your life, but actually doesn't at the time, just feels like you're on your own kind of natural journey.
Yeah.
But for you, and one of the things I really relate to, because I think it's quite similar to me as well, to you, that turned into you taking on some quite intense, incredible challenges. One of which I really want to talk about, which is this, was it 250 kilometers through the Namibian desert?
That's right, yeah.
That you took on foot over 5 days, completely self-supported. Just tell me a little bit about, first of all, why?
That's the question, isn't it, that everyone asks, and it's the one that you ask yourself, isn't it? But I think you and I can probably agree on this, Claire, that it's not about the medal, right? It's not about the chuffedy badge that you get at the end of it. That's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to wear the T-shirt. It's nice to have the medal hanging around your neck. But that's
Yeah.
definitely not the reason why I do that type of thing. And I'm sure it's not the reason why you do that type of thing. I think, the reality is when I reflect on that, in the modern world, and specifically in the, I guess, the typical corporate space, if you like, then things become predictable quite often, and things can become comfortable as well, and then you can start to become a kind of sedated version of a human being, and you kind of forget that actually humans are not here on the planet to walk the same sort of 10 square meters of carpet every day and sit in boardrooms looking at PowerPoint presentations and stressing about an EBITDA number. It's just not natural for us to be doing that, and you kind of forget what you're capable of in many ways, or forget who you are. And for me, the desert was a bit of a profound event that I wanted to do to, I guess, remind myself of who I am, what I'm capable of. Put myself in those situations where I was kind of forcing discomfort, both from a physical point of view in terms of the pain that you go through, but equally, I think, from an emotional standpoint as well, just to force that, to really remind myself of who I am, what I'm capable of, what human being is supposed to be here to do, which is not to be sitting around talking about numbers and PowerPoint presentations, right? It's part of life, I get it. But for me, putting myself in that environment and continuing to do that is something that I feel is a requirement for me, to be honest with you. That's how I view it.
It's like a physical manifestation of that internal change, that incremental change that you're doing.
Totally.
And one of the things that I love about doing these challenges is what it brings you in terms of building up that self-belief. And we've spoken previously, Dave, about and I know we were kind of aligned on it, that toolbox of of self-belief that you build up as you do these hard things, prove to yourself that you can do hard things. Having said that, 250 kilometers through the Namibian desert is a pretty tough challenge. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was preparing for this discussion was like, how do you know when you are ready to do something that extreme? Because in many ways, the courage it takes just to say, I'm ready, I'm going to put myself out there, that mental fortitude that you need in order to put yourself into that position alongside those other athletes. So much of our lives are filled with self-doubt and comparison and not feeling good enough. And then to go and be courageous enough to put yourself in that position and feel that you can do it and believe you can. Where did that come from for you? Or were you standing at the start line thinking, I don't know if this is possible?
Yeah, I think all of the above, right? So I think what I've learned over my experience, I guess, not just in terms of the events that I do, but in terms of my work and the corporate life that I've had as well, is that if you continually wait for that moment where you are ready, then you just end up in that world of procrastination and never taking any action, right? That's a truth. That's a belief that I hold now, which helps me take those big calls and make those big decisions. But it doesn't mean to say that you don't have to stack some evidence to get you to a point where you've got enough of that forebrain thinking banked, or at least enough evidence banked to then take that leap of faith. And once you've taken that leap of faith, you've just then got to trust your belief system, trust your gut, lean into all that self-doubt and try and avoid those kind of booby traps that we all fall into, which is that comparison that, we've spoken about, comparing yourself to others. I certainly fell into that in Namibia on occasions, for sure. But then it comes back to that evidence base that you start to stack up. I'd kind of built up enough experience. I'd done Ironman events. I'd done ultramarathons before. I'd done a lot of research. So I'd done all the hard forebrain thinking, and now it was just over to me. Now it's like, okay, what other excuses have you got, Dave? And I kind of, I thought I might outsource the decision at one point by running it past Amanda, my wife, who supports everything that I do. And she was like, Dave, this is not you get out of jail free card. If you want to do it, just do it. So I was like, right, that's it, I'm doing it.
This is the problem with surrounding yourself with supportive people.
Exactly.
They supporting you to do mad shit.
Yeah. I mean, I love Amanda, my wife. She's brilliant because she coaches me without knowing it, right? And if I use her quite a lot as a sounding board, and whenever I've got these big, hairy, scary decisions that I need to make, I do engage her in the conversation, obviously, but she never ever holds me back, and she gives me that little nudge to get it over the line. And I remember the conversation clear as day with Amanda. We were in the car driving over to, I don't know where we're driving over to Leeds. I think we were on the M62, and I'd purposefully put a podcast on about ultramarathons. Just to get the juices flowing. And then I said, you know what, man, I think I'm ready to do this. And she's like, just fucking do it then. Just do it. I've been researching. I fell in love with MDS about 15 years ago. MDS Marathon des Sables is more of a mainstream desert ultramarathon. And 15 years ago, I watched a documentary with James Cracknell, I think the Olympic rower, who filmed his experience. And I became almost a little bit of a fanboy of that type of event. And it was always a one-day thing for me. One day, you're going to do this, Dave, one day. So it wasn't a gut, spur-of-the-moment thing. I built up a lot of resources myself. And then it was just a case of kind of, you got to go and execute now, yeah. So that's how it came about.
So that's getting you to the start line. But then when you're actually in it and you're faced with things that you've never experienced before, you may not have done multi-days to that extent, or you may not have gone that far on so many days without sleep or been in that harsh environment. So basically every single hour that you're experiencing is another hour of the unknown. Get the mental fortitude to get you to the start line. What is required on an even deeper level to keep you going? And can you talk us through any of the moments that you experienced on those 5 days where you really had to dig into some of those
Mm,
skills?
that's a really good question. You kind of taking me back now. Actually, it feels. I mean, it was in November, so it's been a few months now, but it's quite visceral when you start to kind of think back to some of those days and some of the challenges. And I've learned a lot over my life that I think helped me get through that point. I'm not saying it was easy because I fell into some of the traps straight away. The first trap that I fell into, I guess, was that comparison trap that we always have with other people. And I think, social media now and the way that the youth of today are kind of growing up, it's even more dangerous to compare yourself constantly with what other people are doing. That was the first kind of trap that I fell into, actually. Before we'd even got to the start line, we were in the hotels in Windhoek in Namibia, and I was, chatting and mingling with the rest of the athletes there. And it got to the point where I realised that I was probably one of three who had never done a multi-stage ultra marathon before. And the first guy that I actually started chatting to kind of hit me with his event palmares within a few minutes of us meeting, and he was telling me he was just off the back of doing 10 back-to-back Ironmen in Hawaii on different islands. He'd done multi-stage marathons before. He was just a proper athlete. So immediately I kind of went into kind of self-preservation mode and started to really stress about the day that we were going to get shipped out to the desert. So for me, I was learning on the spot already, and that didn't really serve me, and I should have known better because I fell into that trap before. With hindsight, that wasn't serving me at all, because that particular guy that I'm chatting about, Juan, I ended up in the same tent with him for the 5 days, and he suffered way beyond anything that I was suffering from, and really, really struggled. And I think the trap that I'd fall into is that I'd underestimated my own preparation, and I'd completely overestimated how prepared everybody else was. And it left me in that kind of zone of anxiety and stress before we got to the start line. So I think I was learning from day one before we'd even started the race. And then you kind of bed into it, and you get going. And I think, the main thing with an event like that is not to try and boil the ocean with what's ahead. Don't try and eat the elephant, some people would say, and kind of take... First of all, it's take each day as it comes, but then as the days go on, it boils down to each step, each minute. Just keep on moving forward, and don't start to stress about the finish line or the 92k stage at the end. Deal with that when it comes. Just think about one step in front of the other. Checkpoints are really, really useful when it comes to an event like that, because they're spread out, so you can kind of break down the experience into bite-sized chunks, which goes for any huge undertaking, right? Whether it's a work project, whether it's it's something to do with a relationship that needs fixing, whether it's a conversation with a colleague, whatever it is. Try not to boil the ocean with the task in hand, and just kind of break it down into bite-sized chunks. That was something that really carried me through the whole experience, because otherwise you get overwhelmed, which just leads to inaction, and that's where you're going to fail, right?
Yeah, and I've one of the things I've heard you speak about before that particularly resonated with me was about how you channel emotions into being a performance attribute.
Yeah.
Just talk to us a little bit about that, if you will, because I feel like that's something that's a really useful technique and perspective when you are in a position where you're pushing yourself, or you're in the unknown, or you're starting to feel overwhelmed.
I absolutely love that, and it is something I coach all my clients on. So, you meet people sometimes in your life, right? Or there's moments in your life where you have some kind of profound breakthrough, or something just lands with you, and it's game changing for you. And that happened with me when I joined Team Sky, actually. And I joined a team which had access to Dr. Steve Peters, who wrote The Chimp Paradox. So, and Steve interviewed me when I joined the team, and he talks a lot about how to use emotions, right, and what emotions are, and what your belief system is, and how that can enhance you as an individual. And he was there working with some of the best athletes in the world and changing their performance. So I was thinking, this sounds like it could work. believe it or not, I was early 30s at that time. I didn't really care about my emotions. If anything, I was probably suppressing them. And that was a bit of a profound moment for me, because then I started to realize that actually, yes, emotions will either work for you or they will work against you. And largely it's a choice. Okay, you're in control, and it's a choice. And if you can reframe your thinking around what's actually happening at a sort of top line neuroscience perspective, it can help you through these moments of challenge and moments of struggle. So for me, emotions are all basically, it's just feedback. It's just feedback at the end of the day. And when you fast forward to it, when I was in the desert, I would suggest that probably 80 or 90% of the time over 5 days, you're in a level of pain, either physically or emotionally. And the emotion shows up in different ways. It's either fear, stress, anxiety, overwhelm. And for me, it was a case of, okay, let's just step back and recognize why this is happening. What's happening? What feedback are you getting from this? And how can you change your behavior or change your actions accordingly to make sure that you're focused on the goal, right? So, giving you an example, the last stage was 93 kilometers, I think, which is a huge undertaking. I'd never run that distance in one go before. And my emotions were taking over completely, to the point where I was in so much physical pain. My emotions started to kind of trigger as well. So self-doubt started to come in, fear, anxiety, self-talk started to go around in my head. I'd say maybe for 3 or 4 hours I was suffering with physical pain and emotional pain. So I had to kind of rewire the system at that point and remember all the work that I'd been doing with myself and my coaches over the years, and just reframe what was actually happening. And it enabled me to think about, okay, the pain that I'm feeling emotionally doesn't have to happen. You can kind of reframe that as something else. Stop, think about what you're doing, think about why you are doing this, and that reframing of that emotional response in my mind saw me through the rest of the day, to the point where the physical pain didn't disappear, but actually the emotional pain and the psychological pain had been reframed. So it almost became a bit of an out-of-body experience in many ways, and it helped me get to the finish line. I mean, that's an extreme example, but other examples would be if you're walking out onto stage, for example, and you're speaking in front of people, or you're going into a board meeting for the first time. Okay, all of a sudden your emotions start to kick in, and you feel like it's a life or death situation, and it isn't. It's just that your chimp brain is going into survival mode, right? And you feel threatened. And if you start to feel threatened and feed the threat, then you're going to underperform. You're going to freeze up, or you're going to flight, or you're going to fight, and it's not going to serve you. So that's helped me over the years in a professional sense, in many ways as well.
I love that you described it as an out-of-body experience, because when I think about the chimp paradox, which is an absolutely brilliant, I think, way of understanding how the human brain works in a simplistic and accessible way that helps you to understand that reframing process of emotion. You've got the computer, the hard drive, you've got the chimp, which is your natural instincts, and you've got the human, and being able to navigate those three beings all at once. Having that out-of-body experience, that almost helicopter view of what's going on in your own head, gives you that sense of calm, because you can then rationalize and understand where these thoughts are coming from and what they actually are. And thoughts in themselves are just that, they're just thoughts. And really it's so simple, but it's so powerful. And I wanted, when you're in your coaching, how do you see people take these techniques and apply them, or what kind of people respond best to this type of learning? Did you see them have big awakenings once they kind of understand this and can use it in their own lives?
I think the great thing about coaching is that the teacher arrives when the student is ready, right? So you can't coach somebody who is not in the right frame of mind, or not in the right mindset to be coached. So I think the first thing is you've got to be an individual who is open and honest and prepared to be vulnerable as well, because that's where growth happens. And pure coaching is kind of holding great space for people and allowing them to find the solutions from within them. So quite often it's just through great questioning and kind of holding a mirror up to somebody who might not be able to see what is kind of obvious to someone else from the outside. So quite often it's people who are in high pressure, high stressed situations either in the corporate world or in their business, and things aren't quite going to plan either in that world, or it's affecting their lifestyle, or it's affecting their relationships. And that space that the coaching provides can just offer a platform for them to realize actually what's happening to you as an individual. Don't forget that we're all human beings here. So your operating system is exactly the same as mine, as it is yours. And as soon as you can start to realize what's actually going on, you can then start to kind of reflect on what interventions can I make as an individual. Okay, is my belief system off here? Why am I acting like this? Or am I acting on emotions? Or am I tapping into my forebrain thinking too little or too often? And that sort of perspective can really help with those, what people call penny drop moments, right? So, there are moments, of course, in coaching with clients where people feel as though they're stuck. I'm stuck, or I'm stagnated, or I'm frustrated. Quite often it's just a different perspective. So quite often that just means you're leveling up. Okay, I'm out of my depth. You're not out of your depth, you're leveling up, right? It's natural. This is natural. It's a natural response to the environment that you're in. And it is, a lot of coaching does come down to kind of that holding space, but equally allowing clients to understand that it's normal. What you are going through is absolutely normal. It's how you respond, which is going to change your performance and change your behaviours.
Yeah, I think there's two things that kind of come into my mind when you speak like this. One of them is that the idea of removing the victimhood of someone who feels stuck.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time we all fall into the trap, don't we? Because it's so much easier to project that feeling of being made to be in a situation that we cannot get out of, and that having that situation forced upon us, rather than owning the situation and understanding that the reason we are in that situation is because of the decisions that we've made previously that have got us into that situation. And as much as we can, there are things that we can control to get out of it. And I guess the other thing is about, and this is my shudder words that I hate to say, but I'm going to say them because I'm sick of hearing the phrase idea of imposter syndrome. And I think it's another way that we kind of almost like have adopted a sense of victimhood. I've got this imposter syndrome. Somebody help me solve this syndrome, which I have, rather than taking a more accountable and realistic and calm view of the sense of, I'm going into a situation where I feel afraid or nervous, or this is the unknown, and that is perfectly normal, that I feel anxious, and I am just going to do the right things to get myself as the best of I can out of that situation. Do you think that do you think that we are using too many phrases and labels and names like imposter syndrome to almost prevent ourselves from taking accountability for our own 100%. Decisions and moving forward? Yeah.
100%. I know. I totally align with that on Claire. That imposter syndrome is just not useful at all. If you think about what it is, it's just, you're basically just doing something you've never done before.
Yeah.
That's it. And you hear everyone, people say, "Oh, I've got imposter syndrome," or "Such a body has imposter syndrome." No, you don't. You've not been diagnosed with anything. Your doctor's not diagnosed you with it, and you're not an imposter. Okay, you're just doing something that you've never done before. And I think that's but I think some people can kind of wallow in it quite a bit, and it holds them back because they prefer that comfortable life. But actually, that comfortable life over a long period of time is not going to serve anybody, because that's when it leads to that stagnation, frustration, resentment of yourself. Okay, so that's where coaching can really help to intervene. Okay, so it's recognizing it up front, and as you rightly say, Claire, it's taking personal accountability for it. So I am not a victim of these circumstances that I'm in. These circumstances that I am in are a direct result of the actions and behaviours and the decisions that I've made up until this very point in time. That's a complete reframe. So it gets you out of victim mode and into sort of creator mode, right? Yeah. And even to the point where you have it in the corporate world all the time, right? So we can't do anything about this because of market conditions, or I'm stuck because of market conditions. I'm outsourcing the situation that I'm in to the world, and everything is happening to me. So it's almost like a get out of jail free card for people to just feel stuck and just express this stuckness on themselves and everybody else. And it's just not useful.
Yeah, it's like
It's not useful at all.
difference between behavior and identity, isn't it? And one of the ways that we've spoken previously, haven't we, Dave? Because I was talking to you about the podcast and the concept of bravery and the concept of courage, and I will be asking you at the end about what your perception, what bravery means to you. But before we kind of get into that, I think that I always have related this idea of fear and what fear means, and fear actually being when it's something that you're stepping into the unknown, of course, and there is a controlled sense of fear of I'm doing something that I'm nervous about, is actually a really positive thing to be feeling, because it's something that you should be celebrating, that you're actually being really courageous within that moment, and you should at that moment try and capture that feeling as something that you're doing that's really, really good. And I think that the way that we label these feelings and understand them, interpret them in our mind, reframe them, completely changes the way that we then show up in the world. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through ultra running. Because the way that I look at when running these long distances, and everybody always says, "Oh my God, it's so, how do you do this?" And is this, I can never do that, and also why. But actually, it's a really safe environment to test yourself. There are aid stations, there are medics, I'm going to get a nice medal at the end. It's nice. It's a safe and controlled environment for me to test myself, to push myself to what I believe my limits are at that moment in time. And then what I can take from that is when I go out into the real world, and when I'm actually running my business, where there aren't medics around, and the buck stops with me. And if something goes wrong, then it's all on my head. Then I can channel some of the experiences that I've had within that controlled environment and say, this is how I overcome, this is how I keep showing up all the time. And I do feel there is a real correlation between this endurance, the skills that you learn through endurance, and the endurance mindset that you build, and the way that you can apply that in, say, corporate world or life or family and everything else. And is that how you feel? Do you feel that when you started applying yourself into ultra endurance, sports, it triggered something in you in the way that you show up in the rest of your life?
I think it did. There's quite a lot in there, Claire. You've obviously you've had some profound experiences yourself. I can tell, right? But I think there is, anything, when you put yourself in those environments in any endurance sport, you're right, that it's you against you at the end of the day. So it's a controlled environment. You can always just stop. You can stop, but you don't want to. You keep going. You want to get to that finish line. You want to test yourself. You want to push the limits of what you believe you're capable of. And it's a safe environment to do that in. And I think that you're right. As soon as you can test yourself and level up in one arena, it stacks that confidence evidence that you've got to then be able to apply it in any area of your life. So I totally get that. And I think the point around fear is quite an interesting one, because actually when you start to drill down what people are fearful of, it's normally invalid, right? So they're normally fearful of failure, usually they're fearful of failure. And the reason why people are normally fearful of failure is because they're worried about what other people think. So it's all driven from external stimulus. So even me, when I started onto coaching business, the thing that held me back for a few years before I did it was the fear that I would fail, because other people would then think I was a failure. I was like, why are you feeling like that? People don't really give a shit, Dave. They don't give a shit about you. They really don't. So it's yourself that's holding you back. And really, when you start to, so what you're fearful of effectively is critics. Whether it's an ultramarathon or failing an ultramarathon, or whether it's starting a business or doing something different, or even going on stage and doing a speech, the fear of failure that you have in that environment is the fear of what other people are going to think of you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I love the phrase, it's not the critics that count, it's the man in the arena.
Yeah.
So it's from a unbelievable book called Daring Greatly. I absolutely love it. Some of those lines that just hit you right between the eyes, and you think that is absolutely spot on. And it's from a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. So it's not the critics that count, it's the man in the arena. If you onboard that as a belief system, fuck me, right? That is empowering, because you start to just, everyone else just doesn't really matter.
So liberating. And I do think that some of this comes with age, and I don't want to romanticize it too much, but I swear I woke up on my 40th birthday and was like, I don't give a shit. Isn't it amazing? And I went to bed at the age of 39, crippled by fear and anxiety and the worry and the weight of the world and worry about what everyone thought of me. Woke up on my 40th birthday and was like, how brilliant. I just don't care. And, it's not quite as simple as that, obviously. But I do definitely feel that as I got older, and I don't know if it's particularly powerful as a woman entering your 40s, that you do suddenly have a sense of, I'm just going to, this is my life, and I am unconcerned by making everything perfect for everyone around me to judge. Things like recording a podcast, putting content out on LinkedIn and sharing things. Both you and I do that a lot, and it can be very scary at the beginning to put yourself out there, even in the smallest way. But I think once you free yourself of the anxiety of what other people think, but also at the same time realize nobody else actually cares, and nobody else is really looking because they're too busy concerned about themselves.
Absolutely.
And you carry that really compelling quote, like, the critic doesn't even matter, be the man in the arena. You've suddenly given yourself this liberation to do whatever you want with your life. And I think the younger people are, that they can capture that, don't wait till you're 40, the more amazing that people's lives will be.
100%. And it's like, I feel like an old man sometimes, right? I've got a little boy who's 11 and a little girl who's going to be 9 soon. And you try, don't you? You try to impart your wisdom on people, but if they're not ready, they're just not ready at that age, and they might not be ready till they're 40, right? But I'm going to try to get them to that point before they reach an age where they wish they'd have known it 10, 15 years ago, because you're 100%, you're right. It'd have saved me a lot of anxiety and stresses on my personal journey, for sure, if I'd have just realised that stepping into the arena is actually what counts here. Everyone else just doesn't really matter.
Maybe we need to go through that. We all need to go through the anxiety and the stress. We have to understand that deep part of ourselves so that we can then overcome. And I guess, particularly from your perspective as a coach, you have the empathy and understanding with other people that are going through those things as well, which is
100%
really important. I wanted to talk to you about values, because you hear a lot of coaches and people talking about how important it is to have this almost like DNA values, benchmarking yourself and your actions through your life, and it's how you make decisions or define yourself, or it's about who you are. Talk to me about values.
That's a deep one, right?
It is, yeah.
I lived a world, Claire, where values are really important in my corporate, not personal values, I'm talking about just values in my kind of corporate life, because I was in brand, right? My career was building brands and being a custodian of brands, and people talk about, okay, value, what you start, a brand is not a logo, right? You know that. It's more than that. It's about what matters to you as an individual and how that is expressed externally in an authentic way. And I started to realise that I could kind of ream off the values of the brands that I was working with really easily. And then I was like, okay, well, Dave, what about you? What are your values? Okay, and how is that guiding you? Because if you think about it, I say this to my clients quite often, in the corporate space or in any work environment, right? If you're a leader and you get stuck in terms of making a decision, you'll quite often use the phrase, let's take this back to first principles, right? what you mean by that is let's refer back to our values to help us guide us through this decision or through this really important strategic pivot that we're making. What are our values? Because that will help us. It's exactly the same as an individual. Okay, if you're ever in a space or you're operating or behaving in a certain way that doesn't really align with you, or you feel off, or you feel like you're frustrated or stagnated, or you're not progressing, or you pose with a life decision, or you're in a challenging situation, you have to strip it back to your own first principles. What are your own values? Because that can help to guide you and act as a filter around your decision making. Okay, so I've been on, personal journeys and self-development myself over the course of the last few years. So it was a really important exercise for me to go through to actually codify, write down what are your personal values, Dave. Who do you want to be? What identity do you want to have as yourself, and how's that going to help you move forward? So I did that work. I did my vision board with my values on it and my belief systems that I want to prescribe to, and to the point now where I listen to my identity statement every single morning now to remind me of who I am and who I want to become. My values is part of that, and it's really helped me. It helped me in the desert.
Yeah.
The 4 values that I've got is courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance, right? Which I've taken from the Stoic philosophy, and each one of them fucking hell helped me 100% to get through those moments when I was struggling. Remind yourself, Dave, you're a courageous individual. Yeah. You've chosen to be here. You need to lean into this. This is who you are. This is who you want to be. Okay, temperance is all about kind of tempering those short-term pleasures that you get distracted with often, whether it's content or food. Yeah. Big thing in the desert was taking the right amount of kit with you and removing the luxuries from it, because you have to carry everything with you. So tempering the calorie intake was really, really important. Tempering the amount of food that you're taking on was really, really important as well. And wisdom is part of my value system as well. So trying to onboard wisdom from others as much as I possibly can, and have an open mindset around how much I don't know, and try and learn from other people, and then try and obviously impart that learning on others as well. And justice is my other value, which kind of guides me through sort of difficult times if I need to. So it doesn't always mean I live by the rules. It just means I try and do the right thing, which I believe is the right thing, which sometimes means it could mean breaking the rules. I don't do that often, but it helps me in those situations whereby, I'm a football coach as well. I coach my little boys team. So if there's injustice happening on the pitch, it's quite difficult for me to not say something, because that's who I am, right?
How can someone? Because I have my values, and they are quite similar to yours in the sense of courageous, being courageous, kindness, and fairness, and the way that I identified those was because that sense of like discomfort that you said that you feel when things are just not right, when I feel like something is happening that isn't fair, that really bothers me more than I think it should. And I realize that that's an intrinsic part of who I am. I have a need for things to be fair. I have a need to see and demonstrate kindness, and courage for me wraps up the whole, it pushes me in my life, that this kind of chasing of overcoming fear, being courageous, and those elements and I think there would be other things that sit around it, but those 3 things feel to me almost like guiding stars that really exemplify who I am inside. Other things may change around them, but those I don't think will ever change. How do you, I don't want you to go into a whole kind of coaching session, although I would absolutely love a whole coaching session, but I think, how does somebody start just to even think about, that self-reflection? How do they hold a mirror up to themselves and just work out what that might be for them?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing where you're getting frustrated, I think, because there's an element of what they call cognitive dissonance, right? So if you feel you're frustrated, you might be performing really well, okay? You might be a high flyer at work, a business owner, ambitious, everything on paper is like brilliant, CV, LinkedIn profile, all looks fantastic, but you've something is frustrated within you. So I think it's first of all recognizing what's frustrating you, because that's where you get that dissonance. My actions and behaviors are misaligned to who I am. So that's the first kind of phase of it, kind of recognizing that something is going on. And then, an exercise that I do with most of my clients, if not all of them now, is kind of take the shackles off, take the pressure off this, and just start to future cast. Who do you want to be? Like, where are you going with all of this? Because you've probably got a strategy at work, you've got a vision at work, you've got a culture, you've got values. You haven't got anything for yourself here. Think about where you want to get to. Okay, start to future cast who you want to become and set your vision. And then you can start to construct, okay, if that's my vision, where's my strategy? What values are going to underpin this and kind of guide me to help me behave and act in the right way? And what's my belief system, which is going to underpin it all? So I think quite often it comes down to that the first step is just self-awareness around being aware that something is not quite right. Something's off here because I feel like I should be something else, or I'm doing stuff that just doesn't align with what I want to do. And that is really that's the sweet spot of leaning into coaching, because that's really where you can get that transformation that we talk about, because it becomes then about you and who you become in your identity, your belief systems. You start to address that, then your actions and behaviors just start to flow in the direction that you want to go in.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an automatic thing.
I bet when you first start working with a client and you get through those first conversations, and then you finally get to the point where that box has been opened, and you're having, that's almost like shivers down the spine type thing, because you're like, we're on it now.
Yeah.
We're in it, let's go. Like, we really can start building now, because we've being vulnerable and being honest and self-aware. I think sometimes you need somebody to give you that guiding hand to help you hold the mirror up and have that self-awareness. But I want to talk about what's next for you, because I mean, we've covered Namibia, but now you're going to the jungle. So talk about leaning into your values, and just tell us a little bit about this next challenge that you've got coming up. And again, I'm going to ask you that same question: why this challenge, and what does it mean for living your values to take on this specific challenge that you told me about?
Yeah, so I mean, you'll get this all the time, right? You finish something, and then it's like everybody just asks you the same
What's
question.
next?
What's next? I didn't want to fall into that trap of committing to something because of that external bravado. Shit, I've done the desert now, so people are going to expect something else. So I didn't want to rush into anything. So I came back from the desert. This year has been about coaching, setting up my business. It's been about focusing on that side of my life and supporting the loved ones around me, right? Amanda, my wife's doing Manchester Marathon in April for the first time. I'm absolutely loving.
Amazing.
I'm loving just seeing her.
You're going to cry when she crosses the finish line, aren't you?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see what she's doing, because she's holding it together so well, and the training's going amazingly well. But then I did start to reflect and start to say, right, Dave, okay, where are you going now? What's your next version of your vision? So I started to redo my vision statement. Where do I want to go? What do I want to achieve? And I got so much from the desert. I just knew that I could get so much more the more I keep on pushing myself into those environments and stepping into the arena, so to speak. So I had to choose my arena, I guess. And I think I was lucky enough to find a race organizer who is community driven. They're Beyond the Ultimate are just an amazing business. Chris King, who's the founder there and one of the race directors, has got a series of events under his portfolio, right? All in extreme environments. So the desert is one of them, but he's got the ice ultra, he's got a mountain ultra. The one that I'm doing next year is the jungle ultra. Okay, so again, it's a harsh environment that scares me. It's altitude. I don't know how I will perform at altitude. I've never really done any events at altitude before. Conditions will be totally different. Obviously, the temperature, the humidity, the sleeping in a hammock in between stages. Not to mention the fact that I would imagine there's going to be creepy crawlies, bugs, whatever you come across on the course. And A lot more climbing. There's a lot more climbing involved. The desert had a little bit of climbing, but it was mainly about the heat and the terrain. In the jungle, we'll be faced by a lot of different terrains for sure. So that will test me in ways that I've not been tested in, and equally, the climbing, the altitude. So that element for me, and then the sheer distance of it, right? It's another multi-stage ultra marathon. So there's elements of that just make me get really excited. And that kind of drove me to make the decision. I'm similar sort of process really. Did the forebrain thinking, the research, spoke to a few people in the community who'd done the jungle, the ice ultra. The ice scares me a lot as well. I don't like cold. So maybe once I've done the jungle, that might be the next one on the horizon. So yeah, next year, in May next year. So my training will kind of begin, I guess, when Amanda's done Manchester Marathon. I'll start to dial up my running again.
What do your kids make of this?
They love it.
Do they?
They absolutely love it.
Do they think you're mad, or do they understand the scale of of what you take on, or do they just think that's just what Dad does? He does quite.
I'm not sure. I mean, you know what? It makes me so proud because I do. Without, again, this isn't about what other people think. I get so much from it myself, but what my kids think actually does matter.
Yes,
it really does matter. And one of the parenting mantras that I try to live by is, do as I do, not do as I say. So for me to sit there on my arse all day and force my kids to be active is not the parent that I want to be. It's not the style that I want to parent in. And seeing my kids being inspired by what I do and what Amanda does is kind of the parenting style that we want to go for. It's not about the academic results for us. It's about showing up in life and how the kids show up in life. And the stuff that I do, I hope will, via osmosis, kind of melt down into the kids. And I'm already, one of the things that I did with my boy when I think he was 8, we rode like 35 miles for charity, as an example, and he loved it. He raised like £3,000 for Bury Hospice.
Wow.
And I want to kind of get them into pushing themselves into environments or their own arenas, whatever that might be. So yeah, they absolutely love it, and it made the school newsletter, which I was really happy about. And I do enjoy it as part of the parenting side of things. Yeah,
brilliant. I did warn you that I was going to ask you this question, and when I warned you, you were like, "Okay, that's a really mean question. It's a tough question." Yeah. But it's the kind of premise of this podcast, and obviously it's called Create Brave. I have a real I think a lot about courage and fear and what it means to push yourself and what that does for your performance and for your life. And I'm always really interested with the guests that I have on this podcast to have an understanding of what they interpret bravery to be. So what, courage is one of your values. So this is really like, right into the heart of the matter.
It is,
What is courage? What does brave mean to you?
I mean, it's a podcast in itself, isn't it? Hence why you've got a series. When I think about it, it's not the above the line stuff. It's not the headline stuff. It's not the walking out onto stage, and it's not the running 250 kilometers, in the desert. It's more the stuff around self-reflection and kind of recognizing that who I am at this moment in time is not who I want to be, and acting on that. Being brave enough to recognize that I want to change, I need to change, I am in control, and I'm going to take action, right? Okay, and that bravery shows up in different ways. It could be a change in career. It could be leading into a difficult conversation with a loved one. It could be managing up in your business in a way that kind of pushes you into the person that you want to become. It could be managing downwards and leading your team in a different way. It's not about there's no Hollywood moment for me when I started onto as my business, but that's probably the bravest thing that I've done. And there's no shining lights, no medal at the end of it. But that for me felt like the bravest thing that I've ever done, because it was just forcing me into becoming somebody else and leaving all my identity behind, and shifting into an area that I'm uncertain if I'm going to fail. If it fails, then what's everyone going to think of me? And I need to get rid of that shit. And that for me was probably the bravest thing that I've done. And it's not about the fucking desert. It's not about that at all. It's not about going on a podcast. It's not about speaking in front of thousands of people. Those acts might feel brave in that moment, but for me, it's more about the below the line stuff and the inner work and how you act and change yourself from within, as opposed to kind of resenting yourself over time because you've just dealt with comfortable situations. You never really kind of lent into any change. So a long response there.
Oh, it's brilliant because you've brought us all the way back round to the point that you made right at the beginning of this podcast when you were talking about the incremental changes rather than the big transformations. And I think it's really powerful because from the outside, people see big transformations. You said it right at the very beginning. You've changed, but what self-awareness brings to you and to your life is that knowledge that these big changes happen because of lots of small decisions that you take every single day to do something different, to move yourself forwards, whether that's registering your new business on Companies House, buying the domain name, starting to post on LinkedIn, talking to somebody, appearing on the podcast. All of those are the smallest steps and all of them take courage. And I think that that's a really powerful message because, a lot of the time we celebrate so much the headline and the medal and the big achievement that appears on the Instagram reel. And what we don't see is the celebration of the small incremental steps that each and every one of them requires a big, focused, courageous mindset to keep going.
Yeah.
And that is, that's endurance.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Dave, thanks so much. Like, I know I have a real sense that we could just talk and talk and talk for hours, but I also feel like, we might just have to do coaching. I think I said as well at the Body and Mind event, I was like, next time I'm doing an ultra, I just want you on speed dial. You just keep sending me little WhatsApps of like little genius things to keep me moving forwards. It's fascinating to talk to you. And I'm so grateful that you've shared your like knowledge and experience. I think there's real actionable frameworks and mindset techniques that you've shared that are useful for anyone to deploy within their lives. And I think it's really powerful. But if people want to find out more about you, about Onto, follow you, where's the best place to do that?
Well, I do have a website. You can find me at onto-coaching.com is my website. Otherwise, I'm trying to hang out more on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty easy as well.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on, and best of luck in the jungle.
Thank you.
Keep posted.
Thank you, Claire.